it's a known fact that AI hallucinates. And given that, we shouldn't really trust it so much. The people that are operating the CRM system are more focused on what does the sales process look like.
95% of the items I own are purchased from a social media.
Almost 100% for me.
If you've got 1 million people coming to your website in a month, there's probably 1 billion different ways that they got there and navigated, right?
We're in an industry where people get a little bit of intelligence about how something works and then they think they're the expert on it. The reality is there are so many layers to data science and marketing intelligence and all of that.
Ultimately, you want to know how to spend the marketing dollars the most efficient way. If the company's doing not so well, the marketing budget's one of the first things that gets cut.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. Our guest today is Josh Lauer from Lauer Creatives, and he is a marketing intelligence guy, and that's a very official term. Marketing intelligence guy. He's in marketing intelligence, and right up my alley. Definitely things I'm going to want to pick his brain about and hear what he has to say. And the cool part is he's not necessarily insurance industry specific, which I love getting outside perspective in our industry, because I think that's what makes us better, is to have people sort of push the envelope for us. So without any further introduction, Josh, welcome, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get cranked up and start talking about marketing intelligence, why don't you set the table for everybody and let them know kind of what your background is and how you got into what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah. So I spent probably most of my 20s living in my parents' basement, being an aspiring songwriter.
That's fantastic.
And, you know, I think I was reading a Rolling Stone magazine and there was an ad for Full Sail University and they had an internet marketing program. And so, you know,
Full Sail over in Orlando.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I figured I've been doing all this music stuff. The kind of missing piece of the puzzle is probably the marketing skill, and I could probably get a real job doing that. So, you know, a way out of the parents' basement. And so I kind of came up with this 5-year plan at the time, which was to basically ace the program and then get out there and get a job. And, you know, I finished that program in 2012, and I've been kind of in-house from various different companies from 2012 to about 2022, and then started this consulting business about 3 years ago.
Cool. What kind of music?
Yeah, let's go. Parents' basement. I got to know music choice too, man.
I would call it like indie rock, you know, sort of think like, you know, I grew up in the 90s with grunge music, you know, grunge rock, and
Yeah.
also my parents were big Beatles fans, so like, you know,
Okay.
dark guitars and harmonies.
I wish it was like classical, like you're just getting your Beethoven on down there in the
just
basement.
freaking, I crush Bach every Friday night.
I mean, I can do a little beret and E minor on the guitar, you know.
There you go.
There you go. All right, man. All right. So what led you to go out and do your own thing? You're working in other places and, you know, working for the man, so to speak. What
Yeah.
made you decide you wanted to do your own thing?
I think so in the beginning, I was working at a consulting sort of agent. I have more of a website agency, right? So they would have a lot of website builds over the 4 years that I was there, where we'd bring in sites, and I was kind of the in-house tracking guy. And then I went to Lead Pages, which had acquired Drip at the time. And so then I kind of switched to being an in-house guy. And when I did that, a lot of the people, the connections I'd made over the years who liked working with me would be hitting me up like, hey, you interested in a side project? And so there was a kind of like, I guess I got a little time for that. And eventually I was kind of mulling over sort of the next career move. And I was like, if I got like a handful of people or companies, you know, on a monthly retainer, I could probably make this work. And so turns out I had enough people that were willing to do that at the time. And I was like, let's do it.
Yeah. So I guess because that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. Now, I assume some people you had familiarity with or whatever, but I mean, how do you go to the sales role at that point, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to move from, okay, here I am doing marketing consulting in website consulting or whatever, to now I've got to go out and bring these accounts in.
Yeah.
I would assume yourself, right? Because
Yep.
we're probably a one-man operation at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is very much like instead of just focusing on the sort of specialty skills, now there's like, yeah, the sales aspect of it, the invoicing, all the admin associated with that. But I think what it was, so I'm a pretty avid budgeter. I use a tool called YNAB or youneedabudget.com. And I swear that tool has actually changed my life in terms of, you know, it used to be like, you get a paycheck and you're like, okay, I pay these bills and I got whatever left over. And then all of a sudden you forget something and you're like, oh, this other bill went through and now you're in kind of a tough spot. And so with YNAB, there's the framework that they put together is incredible. And it really did change my life in terms of being able to say, here's the money that's coming in. And instead of thinking of it like you've got any left over, you basically give every dollar a job. And so that
Hmm.
kind of ruthless budgeting ability, I think, made it so I was way more willing to kind of go into the unknown of like it might not be as regular of a paycheck. There's also various contract negotiations, in the
Well,
process.
also, when you go to zero, you really don't have anything to budget, so it makes it easy.
This is true, yeah.
That's too funny. So, what's a typical engagement look like for you at this point?
Typically, usually it's a network referral. I get on a call with someone who's got a tracking problem they're trying to solve, or they're uncertain about their data, and they just kind of wish they had a better visibility into what was going on and better ways to know if they should spend money here or there. And so that's where kind of a conversation unfolds. There's usually like one really big like issue that's sort of bothering them, so to speak, where they're just like they can't help but feel like this thing is not accurate. And so that's where I kind of look on the call. I can pop up the website, look under the hood. I'm kind of fluent in a variety of different programming languages, JavaScript for the tracking, Python for data analysis, as well as SQL for data analysis, Python a little bit more for machine learning type stuff as well. So, I'm able to kind of get a sense of what's going on in an initial conversation. And then from there, it's like, put together a proposal or quote, see if they're interested in jumping in, and we kind of go from there.
So, when you get engaged with somebody, I'm sure that you see certain patterns that start to develop from one company to the next to the next. What are some of the things that you would consider are low hanging fruit that you run into when you go into a new engagement?
It kind of depends on the company. So if we're talking like B2B, 'cause I'm thinking, or a site where you're not just buying something online,
Yeah, I would say B2B for purposes of our audience is
yeah.
probably.
So normally there's going to be a form on the website in that scenario, right? Or some kind of a interest form that indicates that you want to talk to someone at the company. That's going to go into like a CRM system, right? And that sounds pretty simple, but that oftentimes is where most things go wrong because the people that are operating the CRM system are more focused on what does the sales process look like? And then the people operating the website are more focused on driving traffic and probably hitting their monthly quota goal for the number of leads that they need to get into the system. And so marketing will drive traffic and they'll be like, we drove all these leads. And then they make it into your CRM. And oftentimes they're not tagged in terms of what marketing campaign actually drove them. So whether it was paid search, LinkedIn ads, Facebook, TikTok, whatever you're doing, there's a way to kind of add some hidden inputs to the form on the website that can then make it into the CRM system. And so you're like, okay, cool. So now we've got some data that came through, game over. Well, not really, because like in a CRM, you've got different objects, right? So you've got like a lead object that usually somebody's kind of looking through that. There's a queue of leads to sort of qualify to see if we want to move them upstream. And that's another place where you can sort of drop data, right? So like if you don't have your CRM configured the right way, you might have a lead, but then that lead is maybe just the guy at the company who is kind of reaching out on behalf of someone that's a little bit higher up, that's really the one that's going to make the decision. So then when you get into a conversation, you add the decision maker as a contact, but some of that information from the form doesn't make it over. So then when you turn the whole thing into an opportunity, you might have dropped some of that marketing attribution. So the big thing kind of there is to make sure that your data is kind of flowing all the way from the website to the creation and closing of the opportunity. that allows you to really see the marketing efforts from start to finish, if that makes sense.
Makes complete sense. We're fairly heavy HubSpot users here and have a decent amount of inbound flow that comes in. So it would be interesting to see how bad you would shred us if you were to look at how it's set up now. Although the guy who builds it out's got about 30 years of experience and I think does a pretty good job. Um, so
So it go
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, like going back to that, is it just as simple as people like not leaving stuff off the form, or questions that should be asked where they're just like, it could be as simple as like, how did you find us, or like starting with something like that, or is it simply like the communication between the form or whatever the intake is somehow like getting technically dropped, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I would very short answer would be technically dropped, but like the how do you find us is always an interesting one because it's nice to see like out of your marketing efforts, what do people remember? So that definitely useful. As far as technically, I like to use hidden inputs so they don't even know that we're like sort of grabbing this, but like, and it's behind the scenes. Nobody's going to care if you're like, I want the landing page and the document referrer. And you're like, whoa, what did he just say? So the referrer is like anytime you're on a web page, if you were to open the JavaScript console, you could type document dot referrer and hit enter. And if you came from another page, like another website, it'll usually say the website. And way back in the day, like if you came from Google, it would also tell you what keywords you came from. And that was, we used to have all sorts of wonderful data. And then Google was like, it's not provided anymore. And sort of as things have evolved, security, has been more of a focus. And so websites that refer you don't tell you exactly where on their site the link came from. They just say, yeah, they came from this website. So that's where having like tracking parameters on the links, UTM source, medium, and campaign could tell you, it's Google, CPC, and it was your, non-branded campaign that's focused on, whatever kind of phrase you think people would be searching for if they're looking for you. So if you see all those fields in the landing page of the session, we can then kind of infer like that you came from this place and sort of do a channel mapping, right? So if you have the referrer and the landing page information, depending on whether there was a campaign that was tagged with links or not, we can classify you as organic search, organic social, paid social, and so on and so forth. So we can kind of group the channels in a way that allows us to analyze them without having to dig quite as deep as like what specific campaign is this, but also being able to dig that deep and then kind of look at that campaign, how it's configured, and potentially tweak it according to the results we're getting.
Okay,
And
makes sense.
so, yeah, so that those two fields, if they're kind of placed as a hidden input, we can on the website through the tracking make them essentially auto-populate. So as soon as the form gets submitted, that data comes along. And then in the CRM, HubSpot actually does their own channel mapping, so that saves you a little bit there. But like you could do your own, you could use HubSpot's, you could import the GA data. There's a bunch of different ways you could do it. And depending on kind of how you want to analyze it, that kind of influences which way you go with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting and you can get really, really granular, I'm assuming, with what you're doing. What's the average size of a client that you're dealing with that wants that level of intelligence on their marketing?
I mean, I'd probably say 20 million in revenue
Yeah, I
and
was gonna
up.
say, man,
Yeah.
because if you're dealing with somebody, like the Taekwondo studio in the strip mall down the street, they're probably not gonna care. But you get to a point where you're getting into,
There's no mercy in this dojo.
yeah, sweep the leg. Um, but you get to the point where you got competition, every little incremental amount of information you can get to make you just a little bit better ends up translating into big dollars over the long run. So that's why I wonder that. And I mean, even in business to consumer, honestly, if I'm a heavy volume personal lines agency, I could have 5,000 clients that even though my revenue may not hit that 20 million, the volume of information and data that I have could be equal to a $20 million manufacturing company or whatever else. So I think that what you're doing is extremely relevant to the insurance industry specifically because of a number of reasons. First and foremost, it would tell us where to invest our marketing dollars if we're going to duplicate what we've seen to be a successful campaign or, buyer's journey based on all of the data that we're able to get from that process as opposed to just shooting in the dark.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, you want to know how to spend the marketing dollars the most efficient way. If the company's doing not so well, the marketing budget's one of the first things that gets cut. So the more information you have about specifically exactly what you're driving, the better. There's also the question in the marketing world of incrementality. So if I shut off all this marketing spend today, how long before the business hits rock bottom, right? Or like, to an extent, by the fact that you're in business, you have business. And so like kind of what is the lift that the marketing dollars are actually providing? Because a lot of times it'll be like, oh, well, we drove this many conversions for this price, and that's a return on ad spend of this amount. But would you have gotten some of those conversions otherwise? And so like, that's where you get into like some of the attribution. Like if we're talking about Facebook, they do a great job at taking a lot of credit for somebody. Like if you're scrolling and you see an ad and you just kind of scroll past it, don't click on it, like maybe not even pause for very long, they will track that as an ad view. And so later on,
It's got to be
oh, if I even think about certain
I was going to
things,
say,
they
it's
start
got to be
showing
a
up in
small
my
amount
shit.
of seconds, man. It's got to be like a very tiny
it
amount.
is.
The thing that's the worst is like scrolling through Instagram or something, and it's like, I don't know, bird dogs will like, I don't wear any of that or whatever, but I'm
No, but
like,
I always want to check and see if they have my size.
but
Right.
like the problem is I'll be sitting there and like I'll just be, just doom scrolling through some stuff in the evening, like trying to just decompress. And my kids will do some shit where I have to like look over and, whatever. Maybe they're
You're
asking me a
screwed,
question, maybe they
man.
want,
You're
and I'm
screwed.
sitting there and it's open and it's just like staring at my face and it's like maybe 30 or 40 seconds. And then I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, I know I'm going to start getting a bunch of emails and everything from that. So it's
Just
gotta be,
crushing the plushy, cozy female pajama sets.
Yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like that's what I was gonna
Uh,
say. I can't tell you the number of things I get served because I'm going through my news feed and one of my kids, I've got 4 kids. One of them will walk in and ask me a question and it'll distract me. And there's the ad front and center, like I'm staring at it the entire time. Yet I
yeah.
haven't even barely glanced at it. And next thing I know, I'm gonna be dealing with 2 or 3 days worth of them
Start
and
getting like
similar.
direct mail.
Yeah,
Yep.
similar competitors. It's just it's crazy. And I'm look, man, I validate your existence, Josh, because 95% of the items I own are purchased from a
100,
social media feed.
almost 100% for me.
It's crazy at this point. I mean, even the stuff that and this is a question that I would ask you, but like even this stuff that I see it online, but then I end up getting it at the mall or whatever. How do you navigate the dark social portion of the marketing world?
So as far as like it's not covered in social and you're sort of just trying to
Well,
figure out.
no, is in let's just say I go look at an ad and I grab a screenshot of it and I send it through instant messenger to a buddy of mine who I think might be interested in the product, but they don't end up going to a link to get it. They end up going direct to the website later. You know what I mean? I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
there's a lot going on with social that sort of muddies the water for completely accurate marketing intelligence because you just don't always it's unless you've got like some in this you would also probably agree this is impossible, but
Mhm.
unless you've got some sort of a workflow that is just rock solid that you get attribution verbally or written from everybody who buys something from you, and because we all have it, right? You buy something from a website, they want to know what led you there, how you got there. I
Mhm.
Your
never
mom
answer
called
that,
me.
and it's always yeah,
Never.
yeah, it's always after it's always after you bought it. And by the way, as soon as you said my mom called me, the only thing I could think of is Josh in his parents' basement yelling, "Ma, the meatloaf."
Meatloaf. We want it now.
Oh, that's classic right there. There's definitely a few meatloaf moments in my experience, mostly on a screen where I was watching that movie. But
Uh,
yeah, the I think it's an interesting point. The attribution question is a complicated one. And certainly if you send your buddy the picture, they end up on the website eventually, right? So like they might not
Yep.
have clicked a tracking link or not. And so if you come straight to the website, you're going to show up as direct traffic in our channel mapping, right? So when we talk about marketing efforts and all the various things, if we see direct traffic rising, it's sort of a leading indicator that various other marketing efforts are actually working. Like in this example, you got the ad and then you shared it with your friend. So you're advertising for free for them a little bit so they get a little more bang for their buck in that, in that example.
Hmm.
And the sort of word of mouth thing is sort of like I think every business has this dream of being like, I just want it to grow naturally through word of mouth. People are going to love it. They're going to talk about it. And that's wonderful and certainly aspire to that. And there's ways that you can make things more socially, sticky in that respect as well. But on the flip side, kind of revisiting that Facebook sort of view concept, you know, we send conversion data back to Facebook. So we say, oh, we got, this many people filled out the form or whatever. And Facebook is going to say, well, I'm not kidding. I served them an ad 87 days ago. So that ad gets credit even though they never clicked on it. And you can control this. So like that's one of the more extreme settings. I generally recommend reducing that view through window to a smaller time frame. If you're talking about Google Analytics where they get to your website, as soon as you load the first page, we start a 30-minute timer that counts down. And if you don't do anything else, that's the end of the session, right? But if you do a few more things, every time you look at another page or click another button, assuming the button's being tracked, the timer starts over. So then the session can have multiple events in it, right? So that's how we determine what a web session is. And in that web session, whether it's direct or from a Facebook ad or Google ad or whatever, we get attribution assigned to it. And I think this kind of also leads to a concept of like analyzing the user's journey, which or the path to purchase. And there's a lot of like talk about that. And I think a lot of people think about it very linearly. I came here, I looked at this, I then thought about this, and I purchased. But like if you've got a million people coming to your website in a month, there's probably a billion different ways that they got there and navigated, right? So like you start to get into like there's sort of path analysis for a session. And so you could see like, the first time somebody came to the site, it was this platform, and then it was Google Ads and then organic search and so on and so forth. And you can start analyzing the most common ways that people are kind of coming and visiting your site. But certainly there's going to be some nuance where there's the people that come direct and you maybe can't tie it back, but hey, it's business, right? So like we're not going to complain about it. And it's ultimately being impacted by the ad spend. So there's also ways that you can do more deep kind of machine learning analysis, like marketing mix modeling, that can help you understand when you're spending on various ad platforms. It kind of the output is basically spend less on this one and more on this one. It kind of gives you an analysis of that. Of course, there's a lot of details that go into it, so it's easy to screw it up. And you really want to kind of say, like, does this make sense? You know, any kind of machine learning algorithm, take a minute to talk about AI. It's all over the place right now. And I think it was Sam Altman just came out saying on a podcast that he's surprised how much people trust it. And it's a known fact that AI hallucinates. And given that, we shouldn't really trust it so much. I think if you're learning or working in data enough, you can make an algorithm that'll kind of have overfitting, so to speak. And that's like if you've ever had a too good to be true moment where you're like, I just figured this out and it's amazing and I've got everything working and it's all good. And now I know everything. And then, 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, I forgot to account for this thing. And no, the whole thing is not exactly what I thought it was, right? So like if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. And there's a need to kind of like not jump to a conclusion. We're not winning the lottery here. We're running a business and we kind of know how that business works by the fact that we run it every day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so how much is AI really having an influence on your role now? Because I would think that it has the ability to be a good tool for you if it gets dialed in.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of I think of it more today it's more useful on like I think the content side of it, right? So like writing, if we're analyzing ads, like how is the ad copy? Can we come up with better ad copy based off of feeding it data about what worked? Can we use computer vision to look at the actual ads and see if we could come up with better ads that don't have six fingers? You know, and
Yeah.
so kind of do that sort of thing. There's some tools that plug into all of your marketing data now and then give you an LLM to talk to. And so that's some really exciting stuff because now, where you maybe would say to your intern, like, I need you to pull all this data so we can do this thing. And can make it look this? I want to know what the best combination of product offerings is or something like that. These tools are starting to be able to kind of do that. I think from a actual tracking setup perspective, I haven't personally seen anything that makes me think it would replace a person's ability to track things. And I think the reason there is like what you want to track, while it might seem similar enough across the websites, is kind of unique to your business in terms of how you're viewing it or maybe what kind of criteria you want to qualify someone with. And so those nuances, sure, you could probably train something to do it, but I think that's where I feel like a human still helps. And on the note of AI in general, I think it's best when combined with people, right? So like we know what makes sense and we can kind of look at what the AI is coming up with and say that's great or that's awful, and then kind of, tweak it and reiterate from there. But like the notion that we would have AI replacing any jobs is fundamentally, in my opinion, the wrong use case for AI.
So of all the platforms you work with, which one's your favorite?
I'm a pretty big fan of Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, and Looker Studio. So Google Tag Manager allows me to install code on the website that collects the data and sends it to Google Analytics. Then once it's in Google Analytics, I'm able to either send that to BigQuery, and that's going to be more like if you're a little bit bigger. But if your volume's low enough that you're within the free thresholds, we could probably connect it directly to Looker Data Studio without having to have BigQuery in the middle. And then that allows you to create your own data visualization, your own dashboards based off the data you've collected in Google Analytics. And so that's where I can tailor a dashboard specifically for your business based off of all the things that have happened on your website. And then also, if you've got a CRM where you've got stuff that's happening outside of the website, getting that data into a Looker Studio dashboard alongside the website data is a nice way to centralize the insights there.
Hmm. What kind of pushback are clients giving you? Like, is there something that I know we talked a little bit earlier about like some mistakes that you see, but I've got to imagine that, sometimes you bring up, you know, different suggestions. There's got to be something that people are like, I don't know about that, Josh.
Yeah, yeah, there's all sorts of things like that. So I love the example of competitor analysis, right? Like, because that's like a classic one where you're like, okay, so let's look at like 5 to 10 of our competitors, see what they're doing, and kind of figure out like how we could level the playing field, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you'll kind of do your own thing, pull all the data in, kind of make some recommendations to the decision makers, and it can go one of two ways. One way is like, this is great. We totally need to make sure we're on the same level as these people. Thanks for digging into all that. And we're definitely gonna implement, what you're recommending based off that competitive analysis. That's a nice way that goes, right. Another way is, yeah, thanks for digging into that. This is great information. Now we have confirmation that we've truly differentiated ourselves in the markets and we're not doing what everyone else is doing. So we can, so it's like depending on what the goals are of the business, what the person wants to do, in terms of the decision making there, like you can kind of run any direction with the data depending on kind of the spin you want to put on it. And so that's where, I've even had other scenarios where I've collected a bunch of data, present like maybe you want to do this to your website, whatever the changes. And some people will react like, well, we're going to need some more data before we try that. I'm like, well, okay. I just gave you the data. But, so sometimes it's not enough, right? And, if people don't want to do it, they're not going to do it.
Mm. What have we missed, man? I mean, we've been going a solid 30. We usually go for 30, 45 minutes. What do we want to get out that we haven't hit yet?
I think if you're kind of running your business, you feel like things are working, things are growing, but you have sort of a sneaking sense of like, I don't really know exactly why. Like we're dabbling with this, we're dabbling with that. I just wish I knew for sure which one of these things was like kind of the thing, or is it just a combination of all of those things? And there's uncertainty, and you wish you knew more and had more sort of information at your fingertips to make more informed decisions. That's a great time to have a chat with me.
Good deal. Well, if
Oh,
they want to do it, where do they find you?
I'd say right now the best spot is on LinkedIn. Just look for Joshua Lauer. You'll find a young man from about 15 years ago on my profile page, you know.
There's a 100% chance I'm going there right now.
uh,
He looks like he's at a wedding. It's me. And yeah, just send me a message saying you're interested in a deep dive audit, and I'll get back to you and schedule a time to get on the phone
good enough, man.
or a Zoom call or whatever you want to do.
So talk to me about the LinkedIn profile pic for a second, man. You're rather dapperly dressed there with the corsage. What was the event?
That was a friend's wedding in
Prom.
2010. I played guitar at their wedding. I
There you
played
go.
In My
Oh
Life
yeah.
by the Beatles. Yeah, a few people in the audience actually cried.
Well, there you go.
I'm
I'm
hoping.
just
I think they cried.
I cannot stop picturing wedding singer in my head right now.
You know, I can.
Turn around.
Best man, more like better man.
Uh,
Oh man, I could probably go movie quotes with you all day. All right, Josh, I just sent you a LinkedIn request. I did not include a note. I figure like we know each other well enough at this point that I don't need to. But listen, I really appreciate you coming on today, man. It's interesting always to hear like you definitely know the nitty gritty for certain, and that's something I think that a lot of people don't really understand. We're in an industry where people get a little bit of intelligence about how something works, and then they think they're the expert on it. And the reality is there are so many layers to data science and marketing intelligence and all of that that we're just never even going to scratch the surface on. You know, I enjoy marketing. I enjoy trying to optimize everything we do. It's my degree. I look at it more as a hobby because I run an insurance agency and I sell commercial insurance now. And so I do like I get everything that you're talking about. There's nothing that you've brought up today that I don't understand. I'm not saying that I knew it. I learned a lot in listening to you talk, but at the same time, you know, I think what you've done is you've shown my peer group and constituency for that matter that we probably need to know guys like you. I'm just never going to go to that level. I don't want to, man. I don't want to have to go through the education to get to that level. I don't want to have to go through the practice. And I'm at a point in my life where I know what my personal hourly rate is, and I know what it would cost for me to go through all of that in terms of time. It's cheaper for me to hire somebody like you, honestly. And that's not a knock. I'm sure you're not cheap, right? But it's not a knock on you, but it is definitely less expensive than me taking time out of my agency to go try and learn your skill set and be somewhat average at it because I'm not doing it every day. So I think you did a really good job of highlighting the depth that you can go to. And there's enough people that listen to this podcast, even on the insurance carrier side, carriers, wholesalers, all these people. We're in the hardest market that we could possibly be in right now. And they're constantly scrambling to figure out how to get more business and how to keep the business they have. Having
Mhm.
somebody like you in their back pocket is a no brainer from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree.
And you might even play the guitar for them.
Yeah, I do think it's kind of like that, you know, that kid's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. So I get the first sort of, you know, it's going to want a glass of milk, but and then it's going to want something else and something else and something else, right? So like each sort of data question leads to another question. And so as you sort of unpack things, you find just more and more layers. And, you know, what if we looked at only mobile traffic, only desktop, only people that went here? And so kind of the more you get into it, the more that you learn how much more there is to learn. And that can kind of create a little bit of imposter syndrome sometimes, you know, as far as like, okay, we've been through this, we've looked at this, but there's always going to be kind of something unique and something new to learn. And I think that's an important thing to bring to the table. I think I see a lot of professionals, in leadership roles where they spent 10, 15 years over at this company and they did things this way with this technique, with these tools. And they come to a new company, they're not using the same tools. And the first thing they do is rip out the old tools, put in the new tools. And they've effectively stalled the company for like 6 months while they replace tools. And a year later, they're probably getting let go and the company feels like they wasted a bunch of money on them. So don't be that guy.
I need to clarify. I definitely did not mean Wedding Singer, although that is a great movie. It is for sure old school.
Oh yeah. Well,
Oh,
I get them confused all the time too because the Dan Band is in
Yeah.
Old School, and that's
He's
like
in, yeah.
it's like my favorite reaction of any movie I've ever seen is when he's Frank the Tank's there
No,
slow dancing with his wife, and the guy drops the first F-bomb, and it's just like,
nah.
no. And then right, like as soon as he starts shaking his head, boom, hits it again. Fantastic, man. Fantastic. That's a classic that will never get old to me for sure.
is that the one where he falls into the pool? He gets like,
Yes. You're crazy, man. You're crazy.
Oh yeah,
Shoots him in
freaking
the-
Sean
Stifler
William
shoots
Scott.
him in the neck
I
with the
like
dart.
you, man, but you're crazy. Dude, you cut a fucking dart.
Dude, we just
in
need
your
to jump
neck.
on a podcast with Josh and talk about Old School, like at some point. That would go very well. Well, listen, man, I'm gonna let you go. It's been a great conversation. I think that we're gonna have plenty of people that reach out to you. Definitely encourage people to connect with you on LinkedIn, and just really appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend with us, man.
awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Cool.
It's great.
Awesome. We'll send, you'll get all kinds of information when this thing's coming out too. You'll get a marketing folder that you can get as many of the digital assets as you want to share or whatever. And then also we have a gift that we send you for being on the podcast that's unique. You'll be the only person in the entire world who has those 3 items. So
Nice.
look forward to you receiving that too. But have a great weekend, man. Have a good 4th of July and nothing but the best to you moving forward.
You too.
See ya.
All right, brother. Take care.
You too.